There. Can you see that okay? There we go. There's always something in there. Yeah, so welcome to the first Digital Lincoln meetup of 2022. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm your host, Daniel, and tonight I'm joined once again by Sean, who's just turned his camera off. But that's fine because I'm sharing the screen. And our very special guest, who is conversion optimization expert and digital strategy superstar, Paul Boag. But first things first, I need to do a sort of big YouTube style shout out to everyone who supported Digital Lincoln over the years, as tonight is actually our 50th event. So thank you very much, everybody, for supporting us for all these events. I can't believe, well, first of all, it's gone so fast, but also we've actually got to this imaginary milestone. I know there's some small print there on there. According to the meetup website, it's actually our 57th event, but I'm not counting some games nights. So this is one that I'm officially counting as our 50th event. So thank you very much for all the people that have been involved from the beginning, for all the people that have joined along the way, and to the people who are joining us for the very first time tonight. So for those people in particular, Digital Lincoln is a community of people interested in technology in the digital world. In the sort of before times, if I dare say it like that, we ran monthly face-to-face events at the Science and Technology Park in Lincoln, and then more recently at Mosaic, which is Lincoln's digital first workspace. Our first event took place in March 2016. This was at the think tank when we had John Moss from C4DI, the Centre for Digital Technology in Hull, coming to talk to us about the role that community can play in the technology sector. Since then, we've had speakers talking about topics such as VR, cybersecurity, tech and education, design systems, CCTV, air crashes, data protection, user experience, online crime, women in tech, facial recognition, voice recognition, pair programming, automating testing, and even eating elephants. So it's been great to share and learn new things from our speakers. But if you have a story to tell or an experience to share, then please, it would be great if you could get involved and be a speaker. We're a friendly bunch, and we're keen to find out more about what you've been working on, your tech hobbies, digital obsessions, and online side projects. So don't let your knowledge and expertise lie dormant. It'd be great if you could share it with Digital Lincoln. So if you would like to get involved or would like to just talk over an idea for a talk, then please drop me or Sean a message either on Meetup or on the Digital Lincoln Slack. It will be great to hear from you. So on to tonight's speaker. Paul Boag is a leader in digital strategy, user experience, and conversion optimization. I think, like many people, I first encountered Paul through the Boag World podcast, which is probably the podcast that I've listened to most over the years. In Boag World, Paul and a range of really incredible, world-class kind of guests talked about web technology, digital strategy, design, user experience in a way which is always fun, engaging, and insightful. I always got something new out of the podcast. So when I was driving around the UK, like you used to, going to client meetings, it was usually at the top of my list on my iPhone. Paul is rightfully a highly respected figure in the digital sector, an author of 6 books and a writer for many publications, including his own brilliant blog. So tonight, Paul is going to talk about how we can encourage clicks without resorting to shady tricks. Over to you, Paul.
Hello, everybody. Well, thank you very much to those of you that have actually turned up to the live event, so to speak. And shame on you for all of those who are watching it afterwards. You're going to miss out on the Q&A time. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what's just been said. If you've never done speaking, then this is such a great forum to do that. You know, it's a relatively nice small group, and everybody's very friendly, and it's a great place to try it out and see how you get on. And nobody cares if you mess up, because, you know, It's everybody knows how it feels to give a talk. So give it a go. I highly encourage you to do it. Right. Okay. So let's jump into this subject of encouraging clicks without shady tricks. And this subject came up for me as I got older and grumpier, right? And when I was young, I was very idealistic about what the web could be. And, I had all these dreams of this utopia where people come together and they share ideas and, give each other a big, lovely hug. In truth, however, over the years, I felt like, well, basically the web has become a wretched hive of scum and villainy. You must be cautious. And so there are many, many things I don't like about the web today, and I could just go off on an old man rant about all of those things. But I want to focus in today on one area in particular, which is dark patterns. Dark patterns, in case you haven't come across that term before, are essentially manipulative techniques that websites use to get you to complete some form of action. Normally, that manipulation comes in the form of some psychological manipulation. So let me give you an example of what I mean, right? Here's a mock-up of an e-commerce site that is selling a pair of shoes, right? And I mocked it up, and I can basically guarantee that I can get you to buy insurance with your shoes, right? Nobody would ever consciously want to buy insurance to your shoes, but I can make you. And the way that I do that is rely on the fact that you use visual cues to make decisions as you're using the website, and you're not giving a website your full attention. So we've got two buttons at the bottom here. We've got one that says add to basket with insurance and another one that says add to basket without insurance. Except I've spelled insurance wrong, I've just noticed. But anyway, and I'm using the visual cue that this button is green, which means go, and this button is shaded, knocked back, which means don't use it. This one's got an arrow that's pointing to the right, which in Western countries at least is go forward, and this one is pointing to the left, which means go backwards. So people aren't going to pay attention. They're not going to read the instructions. They're going to click on the green button, sold, right? That is a classic dark pattern. And you've been surrounded by dark patterns all the time that no doubt you've seen yourself. Another one of my favorites is Etsy. I don't know whether you've ever used the website Etsy, but basically Etsy sell one-of-a-kind handcrafted goods, right? So, and this particular advert is a great example of a dark pattern. This is an industrial Edison style flamethrower table lamp, right? Yes, they sell weird shit. But if you look down at this area, which I've got here, it says almost gone, only one left. Now, that is playing off of our fear of missing out, right? And a sense of scarcity that we don't like to see things of. Yet the irony is immediately underneath it says it's a handmade item that's made to order. So of course there's only one left, right? Because there's only ever one at a time, right? Oh, but now let's pile on the pressure. Let's really make people think this is about to disappear. 3 people have added this to the cart. If I don't act soon, I'm going to miss out on this one remaining item. And it's been favorited by 63 people. I'm really in trouble if I don't act soon, right? So that's playing off deep psychology that's left over. And there are all kinds of things like this, from booking.com to, well, pretty much anybody you care to mention. And these techniques drive me around the twist, and they drive me around the twist for 2 reasons. One is they're unnecessary, and 2, they're actually bad for your business, right? So in this presentation, I want to show why they're bad for business and why your clients shouldn't be using them, and to give you some ammo to talk to your clients about dark patterns when they suggest them. And then secondly, I want to give you some alternatives to show how they're actually not necessary at all. Now, I wrote a whole book on that subject, but I'll pick out a few of the big ones. So let's talk about the business reasons to avoid dark patterns. And there are essentially 3 reasons why you want to avoid this. Reason number 1 is that consumers aren't stupid. They're actually very savvy, They're also very cynical, and they're spoilt for choice. And what this essentially means is that they are aware when you use a dark pattern, right? Yes, dark patterns work. Okay, so people make the assumption that if a dark pattern works, that people must be unaware that they're being manipulated, right? Actually, that's not true. In usability testing that I've done and research that's been carried out, what happens is people see the dark pattern, right? So, for example, I did some testing with who's that on Booking.com's website. And one person summed it up beautifully for me. They said in the test, I hate all of this manipulative crap. I just ignore it, right? So people are aware of it, but they think they can ignore it. Now, in truth, it's still influencing their behavior, even though they're ignoring it, right? And so what that means is that you are pissing them off by using dark patterns, and they're aware of that. Now, in some situations, you can get away with that. So I followed up with a question with this Booking.com person of, well, why do you still use Booking.com then? And he said, well, I know the site and it's actually very easy to use. So they succeeded despite the dark pattern, not because of the dark pattern. But if your site isn't quite so, easy to use, if it's not so well known and well respected, then there are thousands of other suppliers that could do it instead. So that's reason one. Consumers are cynical, savvy, and they could just go elsewhere, right? Reason number two is it only takes one disgruntled customer to undermine a brand. So if you piss people off enough, they start moaning, they start complaining, and that can have big impacts online, right? Take, for example, the story of Hassan Saeed, right? He was so pissed off with British Airways that he took out a promoted tweet. And the promoted tweet said, don't fly with British Airways, their customer service is horrendous. So anytime somebody mentioned British Airways, they got this tweet back. And that one tweet got picked up by Mashable and the other tech blogs, and then got picked up by the BBC and The Guardian and Fox News and various other places, and became a major PR disaster because of one disgruntled customer. So you have to be very, very careful about pissing off your customers. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is buyer's remorse. So you might be able to trick somebody into, say, I don't know, for example, buying insurance for your shoes, but that ultimately costs the business when people realize that they have bought something they don't want. A classic example of this, a real case study that happened to me, was I was working with a consumer electronics company, right? And their biggest selling product on their e-commerce site was a kettle that they were known for, right? And somebody had the bright idea of, well, why don't we add to the basket, when people select the kettle, let's automatically add the water filters that go with the kettle, right? And that is a classic dark pattern. It's called a bait and switch, right? So you're adding something the user hasn't actually selected. Now that worked out great for the UX team or ecom team, I think it was, because they instantly saw the sales of the filters go up. So the average order value went up and everybody was happy. But the trouble is that a lot of organizations don't communicate very well between departments. And the marketing team started to find that there was a lot more grumbling about the company happening online. And so they had to spend more marketing budget to overcome that. And it was because people were getting pissed off with the way that the site was working, right? But the marketing people didn't really know the source of the problem. They just knew that they were having to spend more on ads. Then the support team were getting lots more calls of people saying, I didn't order these filters. Why am I being charged for them, right? And so every call to the call center was costing the organization £3.64, right? Which was more than the value of the filters, right? Then on top of that, when they returned the filters, those filters had to be restocked, and that cost the organization money. So dark patterns can often be a false economy. There's got to be a better way. There must be a way of nudging and encouraging people to take the actions that we want them to take without resorting to dark patterns. And like I said, this is the whole book that I've written, Click, is all about other methods and methodologies you can use. But in this presentation, I just want to share with you 3 principles, 3 methods that you can use in order to improve your conversion rate without resorting to these kinds of negative techniques. And these are techniques that will work better than dark patterns, right? They will increase your conversion rate in the short term, just like dark patterns will, but it will also increase customer satisfaction, average order value, lifetime customer value as well, right? And these can be applied on any website, not just an e-commerce site. These can be applied on your own websites. You know, if you run an agency or a freelancer and you want to encourage more people to contact you, if you've got a blog and want to encourage more people to sign up to your newsletter, all of these techniques will work for you. So what are the 3 techniques we're going to look at? One is to address objections and reduce risk when people come to acting on your website. Secondly, we're going to look at ways to establish trust and overcome people's natural cynicism. And then finally, we're going to look at probably one of the most powerful of all, which is to defeat cognitive load. Okay, so let's dive in and get going on that. First of all, addressing objections and reducing risk. So here's the thing, whenever you ask people to take action on a website, whether it be to make a purchase, contact an organization, even download a PDF, anything, but especially things where you have to give some form of personal data or part with money or something like that, it creates anxiety in us. You see, we have our lizard brain, our primal brain, the oldest part of us, and that was designed originally to keep us alive in the savannas of Africa or wherever else. So it's constantly looking for risk and constantly looking for danger. And although it's a subconscious process, actually every situation can wake up that primal brain and it backs off of taking the action, right? And it's the reason we often put off decisions and that kind of thing. So take something as simple as signing up to a newsletter, right? You know, not exactly a dangerous occupation, is it, signing up to a newsletter? But it will still trigger the primal brain to run through a whole load of risk scenarios. Now, we're probably not consciously aware of most of these, but they are there and they do need addressing. So they're risks like, what if they sell my email address to a third party? What if their content is rubbish and I don't like the emails? What if they make it hard for me to unsubscribe? What if I receive too many emails from them? What if they pressure me into buying something? And then what if they get hacked? There are just a few examples of the kind of things that will shoot through someone's mind in that moment of taking action. And in sales, right, if you go on some sales training course, one of the things they will teach you is objection handling, which essentially is the technique of finding out what people's objections are, what their concerns are, and then addressing them one at a time. And that is exactly what we need to be doing around our calls to action. So by way of an example, here is my own call to action on my own website, right? And actually it's a little bit different now because I'm constantly A/B testing it. My call to action is to get you to sign up to my newsletter. That's what I want you to do, right? So I address a lot of those objections alongside my call to action, right? So first of all, I make it clear what you're going to get, that the content is going to be relevant to you. It's user experience advice straight to your inbox. And actually that is different now. I've refined it even further. I also make it clear how often I'm going to email them. Every 2 weeks, you will receive advice on user experience design, digital strategy, and conversion rate optimization to your inbox. People's concerns about unsubscribing. You can unsubscribe in one click. People's concerns about what I'm going to do with their email address. I will never share your email address. So you can see how I'm directly addressing people's objections at that moment when they're faced with a call to action. Now, that last bit, at that moment that they're faced with a call to action, is the key here. We often address a lot of these objections on our website, but we make people hunt for them, right? So yes, you say in your privacy policy that you're not going to share email addresses, but someone's not going to go off and look for your privacy policy before they sign up to a newsletter. You have to put it at the moment of action. So that's one thing you can do. So you deal with people's objections. The other thing you can do is reduce risks. Now, I've picked a probably inappropriate case study for this. Love Honey. Love Honey sells sex toys, right? In fact, they're the biggest sex toy retailer in the world, and they're British. Doesn't it make you proud to be British? And the reason I picked them, I worked with these guys in the very early days where they were trying to transition away from the traditional view of sex toys, which was kind of vaguely pornographic and a bit kind of male orientated. And instead, they wanted to target women who have never bought a sex toy before. That was the market they were going after. They wanted to clean up the whole industry. They wanted to make it about sexual happiness rather than it being something dirty or, you know, something that people, you know, is taboo. So what they did is they identified all of the objections or concerns a person, a woman who has never bought a sex toy before might have, right? So they identified things like, oh, what if I don't like it? Or what if it starts vibrating when the postman gives it to me? Or what if the box is split open? And what if the credit card statement says Love Honey on and my husband sees it, or whatever, right? And they dealt with every single one of them. So, for example, they offer a free return of any product with postage paid both ways up to a year. You can have that product for a year, use it and return it, because they wanted to reassure people. Now, just to reassure you, they don't resell it, because instead what they do is they recycle it. But anyway, so you can see how they're addressing risks. So I would encourage you to start exploring ways that maybe you can reduce risks for people. And there are lots of opportunities for doing that. One way of reducing, but I accept that you can't always solve a risk, either because you don't have the authority within the company to do it, or alternatively, it's impractical for whatever reason. So the other option that you've got is to give users control over that risk, right? And controlling risk is, if you give people a sense of control, then you empower them. And if they are empowered, then that risk feels manageable. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. For example, don't leave people wondering what's happening. Keep them informed. By informing people, they feel a sense of control. Great example of this, right? I flew into Dallas, Fort Worth in Texas, right? In order to transfer then across to Austin in Texas, right? Texas is so big, apparently you need to fly from one side to the other. So we flew in, and as we flew in, it started snowing. Now, in Texas, they're not used to snow, so the whole airport immediately shut down. All the flights were grounded. Now, I went to just kind of sit and wait things out, and I was sitting opposite the British Airways check-in desk and the American Airlines desk, right? And the contrast between these two information desks could not have been more great, right? Outside of the British Airways desk, there were a few people milling around, people like me sitting on the floor, but nothing much. Everybody was pretty chilled, right? Outside the American Airlines desk, chaos, right? Lots of frustrated people, lots of angry people. Now, bear in mind that both airlines were in exactly the same situation. Both couldn't do anything more than the other. What was the difference? The difference wasn't, as I initially thought, oh, well, that's Americans for you, because obviously British people fly with American Airlines and Americans fly with British Airways. So my xenophobia was unjustified. However, what it was is the way that they dealt with it. The British Airways person, well, both of them came out of, at the beginning and said, all the flights have been grounded. We're talking to air traffic control. We'll keep you up to date, right? But it was slightly different. The British Airways person said, I will come back to you with an update in 10 minutes. The American Airlines person said, I'll come back to you when I know more. And then every 10 minutes, British Airways person came out and said, I've got nothing more to report, but I'm just keeping you in the loop about what's going on. That is the power of keeping people informed. The emails, the notifications, all of that kind of stuff that we provide reassures people and makes them feel in control of what can be a difficult, complicated, or risky endeavor at certain points. So that's one thing you can do. The other is to let people undo the mistakes that they make. So maybe they order something, then make it easy for them to return that item. Maybe they subscribe to software as a service that you offer. Well, make it easy for them to cancel. Not because they necessarily will return or will cancel, but the existence of the easy ability to do so reassures people and reduces the perceived risk in their minds. Failing all of that, if you can't fix the risk, if you can't give the user control over the risk, what you can do is make the risk worth taking. And to do that, you have to, in the way you talk and you communicate, make the benefits of the product clear. Too often, we focus on what our website, product, service, whatever is and offers, but we don't talk enough about how it can help people. And it's the how it helps us, how it benefits us that makes people willing to take a risk. Apple is extremely good at this, which is why they can get away with charging a premium for their products. So instead of going, all right, weighs, 5.3 kilograms or whatever it weighs, and it's as good as a Pentium processor, blah blah blah. Pentium, bloody hell, that makes me old. Instead, they say so capable you won't want to put it down, so light you won't have to, right? So talking about how it makes you feel, what the experience is like, rather than focusing on features. Another way to make a risk worth taking is actually to change people's reference points. Now, what does that mean? It means showing people your product or service from a different perspective. And I can give you a real example of this. I decided that I wanted to move away from MailChimp. I was getting frustrated with it. I thought it was overpriced. So I started looking at alternatives, and I came across a product called ConvertKit. Did very similar things to MailChimp as far as I could tell just from glancing at it. It looked really quite interesting and I quite liked it. But then I looked at the price and it was actually more expensive than MailChimp, right? At which point I thought, I don't want that then. And I went to leave, but there happened to be a link that said ConvertKit versus MailChimp. So I clicked on it out of as much curiosity as anything else. And it displayed this table, right, that showed me the differences between ConvertKit and MailChimp and what ConvertKit offered that MailChimp didn't. And as I read down this list, you can't see all of it here, I started to go, well, actually, I really want that feature. And that's a really good feature. And blah, 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 all the way down the list. And they shifted me away from being price sensitive to being feature sensitive, right? Through how they presented things on their website. In actual fact, I've signed up for ConvertKit and been using it ever since, even though it cost me more money, right? So looking for opportunities to change how people are reevaluating a product and make them see the broader picture. So instead of just focusing, say, on price, you get them to focus on other things as well. So that's a very, very quick little glimpse at some of the techniques you can use to overcome people's concerns and their cynicism, and not cynicism, and their objections and that kind of stuff. But another critical part, if you want to encourage people to take action on your websites, is to build trust, right? And there's not a lot of trust going around on the web these days, right? We naturally presume most websites are out to screw us. And so we need to work extra hard to build that sense of trust. And this is so important. One of the most famous salesmen in the world, probably you've never heard of him because, well, he's a salesman and you probably don't follow that kind of stuff, said this: if people like you, they'll listen to you. But if they trust you, they'll do business with you. Trust is fundamental to the success of any organization and any website. We have to trust the website, we have to trust the company behind it. And a lot of that comes down to how we communicate on our websites, the tone of voice we use, how we interact. For a start, a lot of websites are full with bullshit and legalese, right? When actually we need to be more open, honest, and transparent. One of my favorite examples of this was in the early days of Flickr, when they had growth problems and they were struggling to grow the company, and their servers went down and they had all kinds of problems in the early days. And actually they lost a load of people's photographs, which for a photo sharing site is about as bad as it can get. Now, they could have come out with a disclaimer and a legalese thing, but instead they wrote this great post that says, "Sometimes we suck." When they owned up to the problem, they said it was completely unacceptable. They made it clear how they were going to prevent it from happening in the future. And they said how they were going to recompense people from it. And they went overboard. They actually offered everybody a free year of their pro account, whether or not they've been affected by this particular issue. So we need to learn to be much more human in how we communicate, use a lot less marketing bullshit, right? Let me give you a real example of how this can make a huge difference, right? In the copy that we use on our websites and how we communicate. This is a real screenshot from the University of Essex website a few years ago now, when I did a content workshop with them, teaching them how to create better content. And I grabbed this off of their website because it made me laugh out loud, right? As well as this, I'll read what the website said. As well as ensuring students make the most of their potential through academic studies, the University of Essex also provides an environment which caters for all the needs of its students through providing a range of accommodation, catering facilities, an active student union, sports, and the arts. Now, setting aside that is all one sentence, right? So apparently people at the University of Essex don't need to breathe in a sentence. What really got me is it feels like, have you seen Silence of the Lambs, right? In Silence of the Lambs, there is a murderer, right? And in order to mentally enable him to do the horrible things he does to his victims, he refers to them in the third person. So he says, she will put on the moisturizer, or she'll get the hose. She doesn't say a name. He dehumanizes his victims. And effectively, this reads like that because the University of Essex are not referring to themselves in the first person. And so they talk about the University of Essex, and they're not referring to the reader in the first person. Instead, they're talking about in students, right? And so it creates this real barrier. And you come across this all the time. People either fall into marketing bullshit or corporate speak, or I have to talk differently if I'm a professional, right? My rule of thumb is if somebody asked you, what are the facilities like at the University of Essex? If you can't say this out loud to them with a straight face, in other words, like it's a real conversation, then it shouldn't be, it's no good to go on a website. So just by way of example, I quickly rewrote it. Notice how, for a start, it's shorter, but how it reads, student life is about more than just studying. We support you with everything you're looking for, from accommodation and catering through to an active student union, great sports facilities, and an engaging arts program. How much better is that? Because it's human, it shows empathy, it shows, it makes a connection with people. And we need to be using this because this is a powerful tool in encouraging people to act on our websites. Another powerful tool is social media. Social media, what am I talking about? Social proof. And we all know social proof is important because, let's be honest, every time we go to Amazon, the first thing we do when we find a product we think might be possible, we skip past everything that the manufacturer has said about the product and go straight to the reviews, don't we? Right? So we all know that social proof is powerful, but people have become increasingly cynical about social proof. Is it real? Is it genuine? Right? So what can we do about that? How can we reassure people? There are actually loads of ways we can make social proof a lot more genuine. For a start, we can use a known source, right? So instead of it, you know, being some random name of a made up person, if it's, for example, a celebrity that people are aware of, or a professional body like Which, or, you know, What's Car, or something like that, you know, that is a known source that people are aware of. Secondly, we can rely on numbers, which is what Amazon does effectively. They have a lot of reviews, so they can get, you know, you think, well, okay, one or two might be dodgy, but generally speaking, I suspect they're pretty good. The other thing is not to remove negative reviews from a website, or to include testimonials that maybe have got a negative element to it. So, for example, if you look at the testimonials on my site, there are testimonials in there that say, you know, lots of nice things about me, but say Paul pushed us quite hard to, you know, to move on our digital strategy. Well, that's not entirely a positive comment, but I keep it in because it's more real, it's more genuine. You can also link back to sources. So I'm a great believer of using testimonials that have come from Twitter or Facebook or somewhere public that I can link to the source and show it's a real person. But when it comes to things like video and that kind of stuff, where maybe you have a video of somebody giving a testimonial, or even a photograph of somebody that goes with it, make sure that they're real, genuine and believable. The number of times I see a photograph next to a testimonial of somebody that's blatantly a model or blatantly stock photography, and it just invalidates anything to do with that testimonial. It's got to be a real person. When it comes to video, have you ever seen someone, you know, give a video testimonial that speaks perfectly with no ums and ahs, no pauses, they're perfectly lit, everything's great, it's obviously staged, they're reading off a teleprompter? Bullshit. Don't believe that, right? But actually, a little video over Zooms like this, where people may be and ah, but say how great the product is, that's much more compelling, actually, than a highly polished video. I'll skip that point. That's not particularly interesting. So the other thing that you can do to build trust is tell a story, right? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, as people, we're really drawn to stories, right? I could bore you with the psychology behind that, but suffice it to say, we love stories. We connect with stories. We imagine ourselves in stories. We associate with the people in stories. Now, you can tell loads of different stories. You can tell stories about the company's history. You can tell stories about the customers. You can tell stories about what the experience is like working with it. But one of my favorites is to tell stories about the people behind a company. The reason being is it humanizes the company, right? It makes you feel like you can associate with the people in that company, that they're human beings, not just a corporate machine, right? And one of my favorite examples of this of all time was I worked with a company that sold frozen ready meals. And we decided to do a few video, you know, little things with our phones of just interviewing different people in the company and behind the scenes. And obviously we did the CEO and we did the chef that designs the food. But the one that turned out to be the most beneficial was when we interviewed this Polish guy that worked in -30. And his job was to basically take frozen ready meals, pack them up, ready to be sent out. And he spent his whole day working in -30. And he was the nicest guy ever. I mean, you can see what he looks like. You could actually see on his very impressive moustache, he had, you know, frost from the working in -30. And he was such a nice guy, and he was enthusiastic, and he loved his job. And he actually got fan mail, right, from people. And here's the thing, not just email fan mail, he got things through the post following this video, because people just thought he was so awesome and amazing. And that makes a connection, right? Because ultimately, we need to like people, we need to connect with people to feel we can trust them to buy from them, right? So showing the human side of your organization is so important. But now let's move on to the one that I think will resonate with you guys the most, because what we've talked about so far is all a little bit markety, isn't it? It's a little bit copywriters, maybe a little bit out of your wheelhouse, not really your thing. Cognitive load, on the other hand, if you're a designer or even a developer, this very much will sit in the kind of stuff that you want to do. Cognitive load has an enormous impact on whether or not people act. Because fundamental to whether people act on a website is A, have they seen the right messaging? And B, do they spot the action that they're meant to take, right? And cognitive load can screw it. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to play you a video, right? And it's a very simple video. Hopefully it works over the Zoom. We'll see what happens. And you just follow the instructions that appear on screen. I think it's actually possible in Zoom, if I can grab Zoom for a second, there is an option to share, optimize screen sharing for video clips. All right. So I'm going to play this video. Pay attention to what it's asking you to do. Try and do the exercise. Right. Are we ready? Here we go. So this is an awareness test.
This is an awareness test.
As he just said.
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go! Okay. So pop in chat how many passes the team has just made. I'll wait patiently. 13, 12, 12. Okay. 12. No idea. Oh, come on, that's pretty poor. I don't count. Ah, Zoe. There's the key. I didn't count. I was looking at the bear. So what we're saying here, let's have a look.
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
It was a bear. Yeah.
Right. Now, Zoe was suspecting the gorilla. So it got, so she'd obviously come across this version of this before. Now, interestingly, somebody who said, no, that's fine. No, it's fine, Zoe. You perfectly demonstrated the point. Someone else said that they spotted it but thought it was a screen mask. But then they also said they had no idea how many passes there had happened. So in other words, their attention was pulled away.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, it was you, is it?
Yeah, exactly. That was it. I was like, oh, is that a screen mask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happened with you is you couldn't concentrate on both things at the same time.
No, I lost count completely.
Yeah. So so it's really interesting. Basically, the majority of people will not see the bear. It does vary. It varies on how hard you're trying to do the actual exercise and various other things, right? Now, this is important because when people use our website, right, now let me back up. The reason you don't see the bear, right, is because your cognitive load is high. In other words, you're concentrating on other things. There's other things demanding your attention. Now, the thing is, when people use a website, there's almost always other things demanding their attention. There might be social media, there might be emails coming in, and that's just stuff on the screen. Then they might have a toddler screaming in the corner. They might be at a bus stop. They might be doing any number of other things. They might have a pet on their laps, all kinds of different things that distract people. And that means that their cognitive load is already really high. And so they're easily overwhelmed and they will miss critical calls to action and critical content. So how do we get around this problem? Well, again, there's a lot of this in the book, but fundamentally it's about simplifying, right? We need to simplify our interfaces when we design websites. And how do I practically do this? Well, let's say I've mocked up a page, okay? when I'm happy with it, but before I show it to the client and before I take it out to test it, I do one last pass through the page. And with every element on that screen, from the logo through to the privacy policy and everything in between, I ask 3 questions in order. Question number 1, can I remove this element? If I remove this element, what would the consequences be, right? It's amazing how often you can remove elements, right? That a lot of the time they're there for visual aesthetics, or they're a duplicate of something very similar already on the page, or they're happy talking, otherwise they don't really add any content or value to the page. Very easy to end up putting elements in that distract. Every element on that page is effectively another player passing another ball. It's another distraction from the important thing of the moonwalking bear. So everything we can remove, we should. Now, there are some things that maybe we don't feel we can remove, but aren't primary elements, right? So they might be supporting information or advice to secondary audiences, that kind of thing. These elements we can hide, right? And there are lots of ways of hiding things. You can put it in a carousel, you can put it under an accordion, you can move it onto a different page. You basically get it out of the way so it doesn't distract people. So if I can't remove it, my next option is to hide it. Now, there will be some stuff that you can't either remove or hide. Maybe it's important information that the audience needs to know, but isn't going to impact their decision to buy. Maybe it's legal information that has to be displayed, right? So if I can't remove it, if I can't hide it, my last option is to visually de-emphasize it. And that might be by moving it lower on the page. It might be by making it visually smaller. It might be by changing the color. Okay. So we can reduce cognitive load by following this 3-step process and simplifying. But actually, it's not our only option, right? The other thing that we can do, it's not just about the design decisions that we make in simplifying the interface, it's also about the content. If we make the content easier to read, if we simplify the language, if we simplify our sentence structure and that kind of stuff, then it will make an enormous difference in reducing people's cognitive load. Now, I don't have time to teach you all the ins and outs of doing that, so here's a shortcut. Basically, take your content and put it into Hemingway app. All right, it's a free app that will viciously suggest improvements to your copy in order to make it more scannable, make it more readable, and reduce people's cognitive load. So there are 2 things you can do to reduce cognitive load. The third thing is to design your calls to action and critical content for maximum visibility. And there are lots of little things you can do in a design to really improve the visibility of whatever elements you want to focus on. Let me show you a mock-up that I produced. Here's a mock-up that I just threw together, trying to sell a gaming, the Rift gaming headset. So it's a completely made up, but actually there's a whole load of things on here that is drawing your attention to this shop now button. Can you see my cursor, by the way? Is that appearing for people? Hopefully it is. Yeah, excellent. So for a start, there is a triangle shape in my typography that is drawing the eye down like that, right? Number 1. Secondly, the button itself is using a contrasting color that jumps out. Number 2. Third, it's got a lot of negative or relatively empty space around it. Yes, there's an image, but there's not a lot of other elements cluttering it up. Number 3, am I on 3 or 4? 4, I think. Eye line. Look at this guy's eye line. Look straight up towards it. We tend to follow people's eye lines. Look at where he's pointing with his hand straight up to the button. Look at the shape on the back of this woman's head. It's an arrow literally pointing at the button. And another thing, and probably a less politically correct thing, and probably I would discourage you using this in the real world, but I'll go for a cheap laugh. People look at people's bottoms. So I put a bottom next to it. What can I say? I'm immature. So you can see how you can actually guide someone's attention around through positioning elements carefully. And don't always fixate on putting it high on the page either. Everybody thinks you've got to have a call to action high on the page. Not saying that doesn't help, but it doesn't always work. For example, I did some A/B testing. I can't show you the real design, unfortunately, NDAs, but they had a call to action on their existing site, which was over here on the right-hand side, and it performed very badly. Probably because people associate the right-hand side with secondary content or advertising and stuff like that. And also we scan from left to right, and so we don't always make it quite to the right-hand side of the page. So we just moved the call to action into the main content column, and we moved it down below the fold, and it actually caused 304% increase in conversion, right? So it can make a big difference if you position it correctly. And also, you really need to think about your images, right? Here's a really great example of this, right? This is a heat map showing people's attention looking at this mock-up that I produced. And look what happens. People's eyes go immediately to the woman's face. And that's because we are biologically programmed to pay attention to faces and cleavages as well, as you can see. But again, let's not dwell on that. So, our eyes are flipping, because we always start up here because that's the way we read, at least in Western countries, and it flips immediately over here, and it robs the attention of the call to action, okay? Because she's looking directly, she's engaging with her gaze. Added to that, she's got this very hard line here. Look, I've even put two different colors that kind of divide the page in half. So the eye skips over to here and stays over here because there's this kind of visual barrier. Now look what happens if I just change that image a bit. Wow, what a difference that makes. And the reason being is our eyes are flipping immediately over to his face again, but we're encouraged to follow people's eye lines. So it's then whipping right back over to the left-hand side of the page and settling on that prominent call to action. So be very careful how you use images, because it will make an enormous difference. Negative space is another really powerful thing, right? If you want to draw people's attention to a particular piece of content, leave a lot of empty space around it, right? And it's the classic thing of, if you have a completely white wall and there's just a speck of dust on it, you'll be able to see it. But if that's a busy wall with wallpaper on, you would never see the dust in a million years. Our eyes fixate. If it's got nothing else to fixate on, it will fixate on the only thing that is there. So negative space can make an enormous difference when it comes to it. Then, of course, there's color. Now, you can't rely too heavily on color, because 1 in 20 men are colorblind and 1 in 200 women are colorblind. So you can't rely on color alone, but you can use it in conjunction with other things. So in this particular example, I'm using a green that's not used anywhere else in the interface in order to pop that call to action around it. But notice that I don't use it just by itself. There's a lot of negative space around it as well. Another technique that you can use is making it big and bold, right? When it comes to calls to action, size is everything, right? So not only, obviously, if it's bigger, it will grab more attention, but also by making a call to action bigger, it enables you to do more with it, say more, make it more compelling. So instead of just shop now, I can now do things like buy a Rift today, right? Which is, you know, encouraging action, and I can include a benefit in it. So buy the Rift today and become a better gamer, right? Much more compelling. The kind of final thing that I wanted to leave you with on this is to limit the number of calls to action that you have on a page. So often we end up with loads of calls to action, you know, sign up for our newsletter, make a purchase, follow us on social media, share this. And all of these things are competing for people's attention. I personally favor just two: a primary call to action, the primary thing that you want people to do, and a secondary call to action for those people that are not yet ready to act. So on my website, my primary call to action is contact me and hire me, right? My secondary call to action for people who maybe don't have a project at that particular time to hire me for is sign up for my newsletter, so I can keep in contact with them over time and actually nurture that lead until they're ready to buy. So there you go. That was a real whistle-stop tour of alternative dark patterns and encouraging people to act. just to emphasize those three tools that are available to us: address objections and reduce risks, establish trust and overcoming cynicism, and defeat cognitive load. Now, you might have got the impression through this, I've just been trying to sell you my book, but that's not the case. You can get a free copy of that book if you sign up to my newsletter, right? So that's my call to action. I'm incentivizing you to do it. If you go to newsletter.boagworld.com/Lincoln, you can get a free copy of the book. And also, obviously, you'll get advice from me every couple of weeks, and we dive into all of these conversations in a little bit more detail. So there you go. That's what I wanted to share with you. I should have agreed with the guys beforehand about how long I had to speak, because I have no idea whether I've run over your time or not.
Perfect. No, absolutely perfect, Paul. I really enjoyed that. That was great. I mean, what I've found whenever I've listened to, sorry, I'm just going to do a little bit of, this is excellent. We'll listen to, your podcasts when you've done it, and particularly your writing, is get into the nub of the matter really easily and explaining it in such a way, but I can write it down and I sound like I know what I'm talking about. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
But that's the, a lot of this, we know all of this shit, right? Because we do it all the time. I've probably not told anybody anything they weren't already pretty aware of. But let's take, for example, something like negative space, right? We all know you shouldn't clutter a design. But when a client turns around to you and says, "Oh, can we fill in that and move everything above the fold and all this kind of stuff?" We instinctively know it's wrong, but we're not necessarily very good at articulating it. And so, that is what we need to get better at, is being able to go, well, actually, I fixate on things that exist within a negative space. And so if we put other things in there, it's going to distract and it's going to increase people's cognitive load, and you sound intelligent that way. So basically, I've spent 27 years perfecting my bullshit.
Well, I don't think it's bullshit. I think it's also sort of, I love your design, but can we have it bigger? And can we have a bigger, it's like, actually, before you get to that conversation, it's like, right, well, we need to think about this, and there are reasons why the design that I'm suggesting, I believe it's going to be more effective. And really, really important, it's not a done deal. It's like, this is the first design that goes out there, and then let's test.
Yes.
And that is one of the things, sometimes it's a different thing in digital, because you have this opportunity to change it. In Lincoln, we have we had recently a new car park, and it's called a cheese grater because it looks like a cheese grater on the outside, but inside there you've got these tokens, and they have not done any sort of testing on the whole process at all, because you arrive at the car park and it has one of these machines where you're supposed to get a button, and someone stuck a sign on, a laminated sign that says, "Please do not put money in here," because loads of people think that's where you put money in, and no, that's where you get the token from. And then you go shopping, whatever. Lincoln's a great place to go, out for lunch and stuff. And then you come back, then you got the machine, and it's got a sign that says, "This is not a touch screen." And you've got to press the buttons on the side of the touch screen. And then there's another arrow that says, "Put your token in here." It's like they've designed it, and they've never actually put it in front of anybody to test whether it works. And within weeks of this new car park opening, they couldn't redesign it, because it's a physical thing. All it can produce is some laminated signs and stick it all over it. And but in digital, we have an opportunity to change it, and we shouldn't squander that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Zoe has said, I love using data to justify our recommendations. How do you do your eye tracking test?
Oh, Zoe, you are going to love this. This is a little, I can take no credit for this, obviously, but this is a little tool that I found. Let me just pull it up for you. So how do I share my screen again? Here we go. So this is a website called Attention Insight, right? And this is part of a new generation of tool that combines data with machine learning, right? So what they've done is they've taken thousands and thousands of hours of eye tracking, because let's be honest, running an eye tracking study, really expensive, really time consuming. Who's got the budget to do that, right? But what these guys have done is take thousands of hours of eye tracking study and built a machine algorithm that will predict where people will look on a page to about 90–95% accuracy, right? So it's pretty damn compelling. And to be honest, even if it was complete bullshit, it's really good for convincing clients. But I didn't say that. There is free where you can go in and try it. But to be honest, $19 a month, right? Or euros a month. And if you're doing design regularly, it's frigging unbelievably good. So essentially all it does, and I'm not on commission, you upload your design to it, right? So here's the design that you upload, and it runs the algorithm, and pow, you get that back, showing exactly where people are looking on the screen, right? And it also tests for things like clarity and other stuff as well. It is so, so good. I cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah, that looks great.
And it totally convinces clients. They go, oh, yes, science, and everything's fine. In fact, I ought to come back another time. I've got a very particular design process that I work in. And I almost never get asked for revisions anymore, right? Because I show them this. And the other thing I do is I do a semantic differential survey and a 5-second test and a first click test. And these are really lightweight little tests that you can do. In fact, I'm sure I wrote an article on this. Design testing. And they're like, you do these, and yeah, they take probably a couple of hours total to run and get the results back and all the rest of it. But once you do that, right, no revisions or very few revisions. It's bloody amazing. So this is the article. I'll just pop it into chat. And yeah, I talk about the different kinds of tests that I run, problem with design by committee, and yeah, semantic differential survey is in there. That's that one. Snap test, which is the 5-second test. So yeah, there are loads of different tests. I mean, here's another one: how to test your design direction. So this is the advantage of blogging for 16 years. You've got ones on everything, and I even take you through step by step how to create an account, how to run the tests, all the rest of it. I also pop in that attention insights into chat as well. Oh, I've lost the ability to use chat. What am I doing wrong? Copy. Hey, what's going on? Okay, well, you're going to have to look up attention insights because I can't focus on Zoom anymore.
Okay, well, let's see if I can do that.
That's really bizarre. Perhaps it's because I'm screen sharing.
It may well be, yeah.
Yeah, that did it. Gotcha.
You see, everyone got to me quicker.
Everyone got that.
Well, that's only because I couldn't spell attention. Can I take you mentioned storytelling a little bit earlier. This is a really big thing for me, right? Because I find storytelling a really powerful, even if it's like a little anecdote, is a really powerful way to embed messages. But what you mentioned there is doing that actually on a web page, you know, whereas I kind of view this as a sort of meeting thing or a presentation thing. Can you use storytelling to help conversion optimization?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I use it on websites all the time. Little anecdotes, that kind of thing. You're absolutely right. It works best in video, in my opinion, telling the story of people in the organization and stuff like that. The key to it kind of depends on the type of story that you're telling, because there are many different types, right? If you're telling a story about how the company came to be, right, that the advantage of that is that establishes the credibility of the company. It establishes the culture of the company, which can be important depending on what you're selling, right? So if you're hiring a web designer, for example, that's quite an important thing, right? Because you want to be able to get on with your web designer. But if you're buying widgets, then who gives a shit about the culture of the company, right? So that's that one. Then there's one about people, but the work in the company. Now, again, that is really good for a service-based company where you're going to be interacting with these people, but it's also good for humanizing the company, especially if you've got conflict. You know, if people are tending to get pissed off with you, or, you know, it can be really useful in that kind of situation, because it's harder to get pissed off at an individual than it is a whole company, right? And then the other one is telling the story of your customers. Now, that is a particularly good one, because what people do is they start to imagine themselves experiencing what the customer experienced, right? And if the customer had a good experience, they imagine themselves doing that. The final thing you can do is tell the story of what's going to happen if they become a customer, what the process will be. And again, that's helping them to imagine and visualize the experience that they're coming to, which helps as well. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's kind of like the rugby player imagining the perfect penalty kick.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a rugby fan, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, it comes from the roots of it are survival based, right? You know, when imagine you're in the savannah in Africa in your small nomadic tribe, and a guy comes stumbling back into the camp all bloody and beaten up because he got attacked by, I don't know, saber-toothed tiger or whatever. You want to pay attention to that story because he survived, right? So that's why we are so inclined to pay attention to stories, because we learn through stories. Stories inform us. They help us to survive situations. So there is something really fundamental in us with storytelling. But the trouble is, when you talk about storytelling on a website, it sounds so bloody pretentious. What we're actually just a method to engage people by talking about your people, your culture, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any more questions for Paul?
Now silence while we wait for people to type.
Oh, that's always the way.
If anybody is.
Well, I think we've might got to the end of our questions,
Okay.
but I just want to say, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for taking the time to come and talk to us, Paul. I will fully recommend that people check out your blog, and certainly let's download the copy of your ClickBook, which looks great. So thank you very much for that.
If I'm being a proper conversion optimization expert, Lincoln, I need to put that into the chat, don't I, really? Because otherwise I'm not doing it properly. Go!
There we go. Boom. So thank you very much. I haven't got details of the next event, but it will be probably on a Tuesday night at the end of the month. But I will try and get in touch with people when I've got a few more details for you. So thanks very much to everyone. I really appreciate you supporting 50 events, and let's hope to continue it for another 50 more. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.